Hi, Camelia. How are you? It's been forever seeing you. So, when was the last time we met? It was 2014, perhaps?
Maybe with Saima at a cafe in Gulshan.
Right. It was lovely meeting you. I remember, I think we met once, and I have been following your journey throughout. It is so wonderful to see women of your stature doing such wonderful things. Before I get into more, so just for our audience, if you could just tell us more about you. Who are you?
So my name is Camelia Dewan. I'm an assistant professor in cultural anthropology at Uppsala University. Before that, I was a postdoc looking at ship recycling or jahaz bhanga in Stockholm for 5 years at the Department of Anthropology at the University of Oslo. And that was after I had finished my PhD at the University of London in Social Anthropology and Environment. And that research project looked at climate adaptation projects in southwest coastal Bangladesh, so the Khulna district. And before my PhD, I had tried to work in development. So I have a master's in development studies from LSE and international relations from Edinburgh. And I was working in development before my PhD. And I realized that I like being critical and not sugarcoating things for donors and their reports. So I decided to do a PhD in anthropology.
Right. So where were you? Where did you do your high school from?
So I'm born and raised in Stockholm. So I went to an international college in Stockholm.
Right. Do you have many internationals living there in Stockholm while growing up? Did you get a lot of international students?
No, it was a strange school because it was mostly for Swedish people. So it was half Swedish and half English at the time. No diplomat kids or anything like that.
Right. Now when you are an assistant professor right now, so do you get a lot of Bangladeshi students in your school?
I personally don't, but I know that there are many Bangladeshi students at Uppsala University, but very different disciplines, so quite scattered around. There are a lot of Bangladeshis in Sweden. A lot of them tend to work in the restaurant sector. And there have been different waves of migration that accelerating since the 1990s. And there are a few higher educated Bangladeshis. So for instance, there's Arina Kabir that I met when she was at BRAC almost 20 years ago or something. She's a professor in public health at Karolinska Institute, for instance, in global health. But academic Swedes, there are maybe less of that I know.
Right. So how's living in Sweden?
For 10 years in the UK, and that was wonderful until Brexit happened. And then once Brexit happened, we moved back to Sweden. How is it living in Sweden? The winters are quite long and dark. And there are Bangladeshi PhDs actually. I met one. It's very long and dark for South Asians to live in Sweden. I think the winters. It's 7 months of darkness. The sun goes out at 3 and it comes up at 10. So you don't have many hours of daylight.
If you could talk about the recent projects you're working on right now.
So I've been working on ship recycling for this project called the Life Cycle of Container Ships, Maritime Working World. So we were 3 anthropologists looking at shipbuilding in South Korea and the Philippines, shipping globally, so mainly Scandinavian and Filipino seafarers, and I was looking at ship recycling in Bangladesh and Chattogram. I did for a bit. I brought my husband and baby with me at the time in 2019-2020, and we managed to get back before the COVID pandemic was declared. So it was quite short, and that interrupted fieldwork quite a bit. And then I went back for a little bit last year, but I've been following like online conferences and going to conferences and following people and doing Zoom interviews and so on as well.
We were talking just before we joined into the call. I was talking about how you worked with women empowerment. So it's for a divorced woman, was it?
Yes.
Talk a little more about that.
So my first project and my longest project on climate adaptation in coastal Bangladesh resulted in a book called Misreading the Bengal Delta, Climate Change Development and Livelihoods in Coastal Bangladesh. And my main interlocutors or informants were these landless single mothers that eat separately, so aladakai, from their parents or brothers and so on. And they were working on these rural roads maintenance projects and so on. So in my PhD thesis, their stories and what was most important to them was in the last chapter of my thesis, but it didn't end up in the book. So I recently got that article out about the importance of mothers and mamas and all these matrifocal kin in these women's lives, because in rural Khulna, a lot of girls are married at the age of 12 already. So with puberty, there's still a huge issue of child marriage, issues of dowry and dowry-related violence, and they don't want to call it jotuk either because it's seen as a Hindu thing. But with the emergence of microcredit, women are almost like an instrument or a tool to get microcredit for men and their families, or to use that money not only for healthcare or education, but for, ghush, bribes to get jobs and stuff like that. So sometimes the marriages can become very violent, and there's also this thing that if you don't pay a high dowry straight away, like from the onset, but a low one, then they're expecting the bride's family to keep paying or giving gifts all the time, and there's a lot of violence if those needs or those demands are not met. So one of my interlocutors said, you can either die at the hands of your husband or die returning home or something like that. It was, very... So some of the women decided to return home because they didn't want to deal with that violence again. And in the article, so I write about that in my book, but in the article on affective assemblages of kinship, I go into, that now these women, they're single mothers, their kids are older, they're in their mid-20s, early 30s, and how they choose their own romantic partners as well, and then they can migrate to be together with the man they love.
Okay. So these women, are they educated at all?
Some of them have worked in the garment sector, and the garment sector now requires SSC at least 10 years ago. So there was this drive of allowing girls to study longer so that they could qualify to getting jobs in the garment sector. So that was a quite big thing. But not all. There were still 12-year-olds getting married too. Because there's this, these ideas of sexual purity, that if a girl is not married by time of puberty, maybe she will have an affair, or like these kinds of worries in these more conservative areas.
So is it something like for all Bangladeshis, or is just religion plays a role in it?
I think religion plays a role. My interlocutors were both Hindu and Muslim. What's interesting is that amongst the Hindu women, education was prioritized much more, so they would study until SSC almost, a lot of the girls, and marry later, but it was completely unaccepted, much less accepted for women to return to their babar bari amongst the Hindu communities, because once you're married, you belong to that family and you should not dare come back. So that was a bit stricter, I found.
See, the kind of work we do, I don't get any opportunity to actually interact in such situation. We have women who are going to be aerospace engineers coming to us to become like they're doing their PhD, they're studying anthropology, they're writing books. So coming from those women, that's the reason I wanted to bring this up, because I think people need to be aware of where we are and what we can do with the power of our education and our knowledge. We can actually reach out to them, work in terms of advocacy, and how we can actually assist people. We don't actually have to work in the development sector to actually get more involved. That's the reason I wanted to bring it out, because when I was reading your article, it was so wonderful. It was so wonderful, wonderfully articulated, but the stories are heart-jarring. You know what I'm trying to say? So that's the reason I just wanted to hear about it. This is so not relevant. I just wanted to share with our audience a success story of a wonderful woman who's doing many things, who's a published author, is a professor, has done PhD, and also studied across the globe. So that's what I wanted to portray, that women should be in education, we should travel, but this is something really interesting came out of it. So if you would like to tell something to our audience who are, especially women who are very scared to even think about going abroad to study alone, they probably, like you said, that at a very early age they are getting married, they are thinking about, they are not doing anything considering the fact that of their security of their society. So from your experience, if you'd like to tell something to the audience.
I was really inspired by my own mother, actually, because when she was young, she was, part of all these protests against the Pakistan regime and organizing these things. And after independence, she didn't tell my nanu, but went to Dhaka for an interview for scholarship to study in the Soviet Union, and she got in. So she was 20 years, didn't speak Russian, and just moved to the Soviet Union, right? And finished her degrees and learned Russian. So I'm also very empowered by my own mother for being so strong and brave. And I think for me, I never overthink, or I think very little for being an academic. If I feel like I want to do something, then I do it, and then I think later, or I deal with it later. I think a lot of issues is that if you overthink what will happen if I do this, what will happen if I do that, how will this and this and this, then you end up not doing anything. So if you want to apply. If you get in, take the opportunity and make it work.
When did you become a mother?
Oh, I was finishing up my PhD.
So you were pregnant when you were doing your PhD?
I was pregnant while writing it up. I was pregnant during my defense. And Aurora came, she was 7 months old when I started my postdoc in Oslo. And Scandinavia is very good for combining family and work. I don't think I could have been a mother and an academic in the UK or US system, to be honest.
Why do you say that? How is it more helpful?
Because in Scandinavia, we get 12 months of parental leave. So you are paid to stay at home. And also in Scandinavia, if you're on a temporary contract like a PhD or a postdoc, it actually extends your contract. So I had a 4-year contract. And because I was away for a year, I had 5 years in total. So that was useful. And also in Scandinavia, if your child is sick, after the leave, you can just register and say, I'm staying home with a sick child. And very few places have that. And also in Scandinavia, the kindergartens are affordable. So they're about 100 euros a month or something, 1,200 euros a month. And it's like 1,000 in the UK, right? Or in the US, I don't know. So it's also childcare, being able to have work hours suitable for children, having nurseries and these things that make it easier to combine work and family, but not 100% easy.
To go or not to go?
I think it depends on who they are, what they want, what they want to do. For me, I am a Swedish speaker, right? So I'm native in speaking Swedish, and I'm used to the cold and the snow, but also manustanda. So it's very difficult, I think, for a lot of people coming from Bangladesh or India coming here. So it also depends on the time span. Like a 1-year master is maybe doable, but maybe it's, and also if they have friends or family already here, I think helps. But in general, like, does the degree in itself help you do what you want to do? I wouldn't advise coming to Sweden just to have a degree from Sweden, but rather this degree will help me get a much better job or better position, promotion, thinking strategically that there's a good fit.
Right. Is there any Bangladeshi restaurants in your area?
Most of the Indian restaurants are run by Bangladeshis, and they cater to the Swedish preference. But it's like, if you want like the homemade stuff, you have to like cook it yourself. Like, they don't serve Bangladeshi food at the restaurants. It's more like Indian.
Lovely talking to you.